Unfortunately, it took Israel carrying out a genocide in Gaza for people to start understanding.
إلهان عمر نائبة ديمقراطية في الكونغرس الأميركي.
Just talking about Israel's war crimes was something that, you were called hateful before. Many members in Congress will talk about the pressure that they get from AIPAC. My neighbor is a little crazy. Being in office for those 2 years under the Trump administration, we had death threats.
Why do you think that President Trump has such a fixation on you specifically? Congresswoman İlhan, thank you for having us.
Yes, of course.
I would like through this interview to have sort of a conversation about your journey and how you came to Congress. It's a unique journey coming from a war-torn Somalia, then into a refugee camp in Kenya, and then to the US, and then to the Congress. How did the journey shape your whole outlook about politics, maybe, and about then your later experience in Congress?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when you go through, a normal childhood like I did, and have it be one day interrupted with a war waging, and you lose everything and you enter statelessness, which is what it means to be a refugee in a refugee camp and live through the harshness of what that is, and then to get, alhamdulillah, the opportunity to start life over in a place like America. It's a wonderful thing, but it does change the way in which you look at conflicts, the way you look at migration, the way you look at domestic stability, and I think it gives you a profound appreciation for what humanity can offer when we are at our greatest.
But then you entered Congress in the midst of the Trump's first era, which really doesn't look up to immigration as a positive issue. Mm-hmm. How did that affect your first tenure? And if we can compare it to the first 9 months of Trump's second term, do you think things are getting harder, harsher, or it's the same stable policy?
In 2018, when I was elected at our victory party, I talked about how, in Minnesota, we don't just welcome refugees, but we elected a refugee to Congress. And I think it was a response, mostly about the state of our nation, having a president who campaigned on putting, a Muslim ban, deporting immigrants, closing our border, getting rid of the refugee resettlement program. It was a statement that my state, my constituents, my neighbors were sending to the administration by electing me into Congress. And obviously it hadn't been easy, being in office for those 2 years under the Trump administration. We had death threats. It was a very challenging time, but it's nothing like it is now. He has become completely unhinged. We're seeing him carrying out the authoritarian playbook that was put forth in the 2025 project. And it is scary times, not just for immigrants, but for Americans in general, because we are seeing our First Amendment rights being eroded. We are seeing, militarization forming in our cities, and we're certainly seeing the powers of Congress being challenged by the administration. And so it is scary times when we think about what is at stake for democracy, what is at stake for the balance of power. This is certainly not what the founding fathers of the American dream were thinking about when they said, that when they set out to write the Constitution.
You had at the beginning of the year pushed for a legislation, neighbors not enemies, facing the whole ideological background of the administration. But now, 9 months later, we see that just a couple of days ago, the president said that he wants to have federal troops in Portland. We have ICE everywhere. Things are not going the way that you as a congresswoman maybe hoped for. Do you think that Congress still can play a role to push back, or the executive orders and the other people that can play politics in the US have more influence than Congress itself today?
Yeah, I mean, what we are able to do, even though we are in the minority, is, work with our partners, whether it is different attorney generals in democratic states, or non-profit organizations, is to push back through litigation. And as a member of the litigation response task force, it has been one of our greatest tools to hold the administration accountable, to make sure that they are not going without being challenged in their abuse of power. But my hope is that we do win the majority back in the House and the Senate, and then we can fully implement an agenda that stops the administration from destroying the Constitution and our democracy.
And in this fight, do you think that the Democratic Party is unified on one agenda to push back pending the next election?
We are completely unified. Now we do not have the kind of environment that the Republicans have created for themselves, whether it is through media outlets or the president using his pulpit in the way that he does, or the sort of right-wing atmosphere when it comes to influence. But we are very much unified in having an agenda that looks for an opportunity for us to really care for the American people and the struggles that they're going through, but to also defend our democracy and uphold the Constitution.
Why do you think that President Trump has such a fixation on you specifically? Because once you were in the Congress, he had some attacks, and now in the weekend also it got reignited. Do you think it has to do with your policies or your background, or maybe both?
My father in 2019 asked the same question. He was like, "You're one of 435 members of the House. You're a freshman. You don't really have real power. What is wrong with this man? Like, why is he so obsessed with you?" And what I said to my dad, Allah Rahma, is that this man is obsessed with immigrants. He's obsessed with Africans. He's obsessed with Muslims, and I just happen to embody those identities that he has had an obsession with. He was the person who ignited the birther, the Obama birther. Conspiracy theory where he was obsessed about Obama being, born in Africa and being a secret Muslim. Well, he just happens to now have a Muslim woman who is in Congress who was born in Africa and came to this country as an immigrant. And so all I can say is that he can keep his obsession. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not to be bullied, and I'm not backing down.
And what do you think about the resurging, it seems at least, the resurging political violence in general from the Charlie Kirk assassination, but before that, the assassination of a congresswoman in Minnesota and her husband. And now in the weekend we have mass shootings. Do you think that something relates specifically to this tension going up in politics in the US because of President Trump's tenure? or it's at both sides in the Democratic Party or the extreme left wing in it and the extreme right in the Republican Party. So you think it's a bipartisan issue, or it has a specific political ecosystem that can engender it?
Yeah. I mean, we have certainly seen a rise of not just political violence, but mass shootings in general with the first Trump presidency. And so, you know, we can say that there is a true line between the violent country we are living in and the hateful president that violence came with. He certainly has never been a president that's interested in creating a more perfect union. He doesn't see himself as representing the whole country, regardless of what party people belong to or who they vote for. In previous years, we would have presidents when there were times of crisis that would seek to unify the country in their speech, in their demeanor, you know, whether it was Bush after 9/11, or Obama when we saw police violence against Black people. But Trump really has always been interested in creating division in this country, in amplifying hate and bigotry, xenophobia, and all of it. And so I do see there being a connection with the kind of rhetoric that the president likes to use, and people reacting with violence.
What do you think the best reaction should be towards the pressure that maybe academic institutions faced and some capitulated, some media corporations also faced, and some shows were cancelled, some others are in between? What is the reaction that can balance out this effort from the government?
I mean, in a democracy, you want all the institutions to operate independently and to never bend the knee to what the government wants them to do. And in this case, the government being Trump himself. It's been really disappointing to see universities that have capitulated to, the requests of the president, in fear of having their funds disappear. We have seen places like Harvard and others who said no. They're still going strong, and they have the support of the public. And then you have places like Colombia, where they capitulated to the president and his administration, and you see people really being ashamed of them and an association with them, and the kind of turmoil that Colombia is going through right now. I think in a healthy democracy, it is important for people to say no when the government is forcing them to take a position. I think for the sake of all of us who love this country and serve this country, we have to do everything that we can not to be complacent to the creation of the authoritarian regime that he wants to create.
Your efforts to maybe shed a light about the outsized role or influence of some lobby groups and money in politics preceded the war of the 7th of October and the Israeli war. And you've been a target also from these segments of the political spectre in the US, saying sometimes that you're an anti-Semite, saying all sorts of allegations against you. Do you think that now foreign politics plays a role even in determining political reactions from the constituency and from maybe members of the Congress in local issues? It's affecting even local politics, because now we're seeing suddenly that the Israeli question is asked when we talk about TikTok, when we talk about even Charlie Kirk's murder and Netanyahu's reaction to it, and even the Epstein files. Do you think that's all of it is an effect of the 7th of October and the aftermath, or it's the issue relating to money in politics more and the outsized role and influence of the lobbies?
You know, when we think about foreign policy as part of a regular debate when you're running for office in this country, oftentimes it only is talked about whether you would support sending American troops somewhere, right? Like, that's kind of where the conversation oftentimes stays. But for me, as somebody who thinks of herself as informed on global issues, I understood that being a member of Congress was an important way to address just foreign policy in general, right? Where does our money go? Who does our country support? Who they don't support? Like, what sanctions really mean? How they impact different countries? What migration is, and how that's produced by some of our foreign policy. And when I came to Congress, I think a lot of people who did not want to have a conversation about foreign policy in that kind of way hated the fact that I was forcing the issue. And I do believe that, unfortunately, it took Israel carrying out a genocide in Gaza for people to start understanding what Israel's role was in the Middle East and how we have helped with everything, and the impunity that we have allowed them to operate with. It's been fascinating for people to learn about the Nakba just now, right? For people to no longer shame us for talking about the apartheid. I remember when we read the report that Israel, the apartheid in Israel, the members were really upset that we were reading that into the congressional record. And now it's just, you know, another thing that people know about, or the occupation, the fact that Gaza was a prison essentially for 2 million people. Today, it's even funny to look back, maybe even 2 years ago, when, you know, we called for a ceasefire and the White House said we were repugnant, right? And
you were then removed from the Foreign Affairs Committee because of these remarks in 2023, I guess. No?
Yeah. I mean, just talking about Israel's war crimes was something that, you know, you were called hateful for. And right now, I think with Democratic voters, Israel has maybe 8% popularity. And so, you know, for me, fortunately, I represent a constituency that cares about foreign policy. And so they understood that we all have a role in the foreign policy of our country. It is our tax dollars, it's with our consent, with our vote, that these policies get to be carried out, to the detriment of so many innocent people. And so they've never really believed in the lies that AIPAC and others would put on the air about what my position was. They understood that it wasn't about being hateful. It was about being morally courageous, to say this is wrong. It is wrong for us to continuously give billions of dollars to a country that is killing innocent people, that is oppressing innocent people, that is subjugating innocent people, that is denying and taking away the land of innocent people. And now I think the rest of the nation is where my constituents were back those years.
You voted against sending billions in weapons to Israel, and you challenged the legality of this unconditional support. You co-sponsored ceasefire resolutions. You publicly described Israel's action as a genocide. And as you mentioned, in most of the polls, whole of America, maybe more to the Democratic Party, but all of America seems to be less inclined to support Israel after the genocide. Why do you think there is a rift between the popular opinion, which is clear now, and in Congress, where, despite your efforts, the majority in Congress still aligns with Israel more?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we know that many members in Congress, privately, some publicly, will talk about the pressure that they get from AIPAC and others who lobby on behalf of the interests of Israel. And many people do not want to have that pressure, that wrath. What we hope is that they get more scared
from the votes
in upsetting their voters than they are in upsetting AIPAC and others who lobby on behalf of our unconditional support for Israel, because what they are signing up to support is death and destruction. It's immoral, and if we are to think of ourselves as Americans who care about humanity, to have members of Congress constantly supporting something that is so inhumane, it's wrong. It sends the wrong message.
Definitely. Finally, on the issues relating to domestic, maybe politics, how do you see the influence of the Charlie Kirk assassination and the memorial and the speeches that went there to the whole political climate in the US? And how do you compare it to the tragedy that you witnessed in your state, your home state, with the assassination of a congresswoman and her husband? And the difference in reactions to both, because we saw a big reaction to Charlie Kirk. Definitely he's a celebrity and he's known, but also there's a political assassination after all. And how do you relate to this fear? Because your name was mentioned as one of the targets of the killer of the congresswoman and her husband, as a target, as a future target. Do you fear that, first of all, do you fear on your life, but do you fear that this will capture US politics, this fear of violence?
I mean, I would say the difference in reaction probably has to do with the difference in the way in which the assassinations were carried out. My dear friend Melissa Horman, the former Speaker of the Minnesota House, and her husband Mark, and Senator John Hoffman and his wife, they were attacked in their homes. So there wasn't really an ability for us to see the image of their assassination. With Charlie, it was public, it was recorded, and it was just so violently triggering for everybody. And it is an image that's going to live for a really long time, right? This was a young person with young children and a young widow. And so I think that probably has a lot to do with the reaction that you're seeing and the fact that people are talking about it, right? It was there. You can see it, yes. Which, I was talking with my daughters and son yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that there isn't really an image of a political assassination that goes viral just the second it happens. John F. K's is recorded, but you have to go look for it, and it was a different era. With social media, this was very immediate. Even if you didn't know him, it was an image of somebody getting killed in a really violent way. And so, just like it was for George Floyd, just watching a human being lose their life is something that I think strikes a core with people. So I think that's probably what the reaction and all of it is about. But I don't think it does create a different environment than the assassinations in the 60s did, right, of these political figures. I think it is a moment. It'll probably fade. I don't believe it changes the way in which people conduct themselves. I think they'll be a little bit more cautious of the environments that they're going into if they are a public figure. But I have the same fears as I did before he was assassinated, because my death threats have always been there. They've always lingered. I do not walk around being afraid to die. Alhamdulillah, I believe you're born when you're born and you die when you're supposed to die. So I don't worry about death in that kind of way. And I think it's just because of my faith and the way that I was raised. So I know that a lot of my colleagues are scared for their lives and scared to do events. But right after that happened, we had our town hall, and I went and I did my town hall, and I have one next month, and or in a couple of days. It's not next month. It's a couple of days, and so I continue to work on behalf of the people who elected me, and I think in this moment it's really important for people to be brave and not scared, because fear is what these kind of actions want to instill in people, and they want to stop us from expressing ourselves, from advocating, from doing the work that we are supposed to do. And I think if we allow ourselves to get in that environment, then we're failing ourselves.
But isn't it affecting a little bit even Congress? Because here your neighbor, Nancy Mace, censored you because you stated maybe a similar comment that you stated now, adding at the end some of the political positions that you don't agree with Charlie Kirk. That was enough to try to censor you here in the Congress. So don't you think there is this fear of a whole assault because of this assassination?
Well, I mean, my neighbor is a little crazy. She's not actually a stable human being. And so, it makes sense that she would try to do some stunt. But I think there are a lot of people who would like to use this moment to go after their adversaries, right? To try to limit speech, to try to limit our access to different spaces. But I just don't think anybody should allow that to happen. We do not live in a free country if people are not free to do the thing that they were created for.
Finally, the last question. You mentioned that the midterm would be an essential point to try to balance things out if the Democratic Party had a majority in the Congress. what about the mayoral races? Because a lot of spotlight is being shed on specific races, especially in New York with Zohran Mamdani, as a fight that would define maybe the soul of the Democratic Party heading into the midterms. Do you think it's an essential thermometer to just see what is the temperature of the constituency now?
I think mayoral races are unfortunately not a good thermometer.
Yeah.
Because if you are in a Democratic city like New York City, the Democrats going to win, right? And so, or Minneapolis or, any city, what I think might be a better thermometer is the governor's races that are happening in New Jersey and Virginia. I think those will set the tone of whether Democrats have a chance or not.
But maybe about intra-democratic wings.
Yes, I mean, of course, like we want our base energized and excited to come out and vote and to campaign and to donate and to do all of the things that sets you up for success. Candidates like Zohran Mamdani have created a different kind of excitement with a generation that has kind of lost their interest in participating in politics. And like the likes of my daughter, they're very much energized by seeing somebody who's authentic, who is willing to be out there to talk about the issues that they care about. For a lot of young people, they feel like Democrats don't really care to address the issues that they face with affordability, whether it's buying a new house or being able to rent and not have 10 roommates, whether it is having one job or 3 jobs, whether it's choosing to start a family or not. Like that's their generation's struggle, and Zohran speaks to that. And you have candidates like Omar Fatah in Minneapolis who speak into that. You have Musab Ali in Jersey City who speak into that. There's a lot of young people who are of the generation that is struggling in a new way that are, I think, exciting the young base. And as Democrats, it's important for us not to shut that down, but to use it and to be inspired by it. I was of a generation when we got elected in 18 that inspired a lot of young people to get involved, and now it's these young gentlemen who are doing that, and it's really exciting to see their rise and what they are bringing to the party.
Thanks a lot, Congresswoman, for having us, and thanks a lot for the interview.
Yes, thank you.